Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison, the co-founders of InGoal Magazine. I'm Darren Millard. This is InGoal Radio, the podcast, presented by Source for Sports Surrey, The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com. Into the final quarter of the National Hockey League season. Junior leagues are starting to gear up for the playoffs, and we are into the postseason for college hockey. It is the stretch drive, and we're looking at a lot of equipment lines coming out. This is going to be an exciting episode as we deal with a lot of gear, both ends of it, really. The top with your head and the end with the stick. You're going to have to play along and stay with us for a full explanation as we're bringing the fellas. And this is going to be a fun episode because Greg Harrison, the famed mask maker, a pioneer in the mask business, chats with Hutch for over an hour and 45 minutes. No, it's not that long. But it's a lengthy conversation that will have you riveted, and I mention lengthy because you'll listen to it and you'll go, I could listen to another hour of this, and I'm not kidding about this. And we'll also get into the gear segment over with the guys at the Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com. But Hutch, I'm excited for everybody's reaction to your chat with Greg.
So am I. I know we have a lot of people that listen to the show that were fans of goaltending back when I was, because we've had such great reaction to the veterans we've had on the show. And for me, it was really exciting to bump into Greg online. Quite literally happened on Instagram. I noticed him on there, sent him a direct message. I said, "Is this the Greg Harrison?" And was really excited to get a note back saying it was, because I was a huge fan of goalie masks way back in the 70s. And he obviously is one of the central figures of the development, not only of the technology of the mask, but of the artwork as well. And as I told him, I don't think on the interview, has a tiny little role in the creation of InGoal Magazine. In fact, I said, I think I probably owe him some residuals as a result, because I got my start in this little bit, and we started InGoal. Much of the original content we had at the time was around masks, when people weren't really publishing mask art to the extent that they are now, and certainly weren't crediting the artists involved. And so that's something that we started doing. But for me, it actually began way back in grade 6 when I was doing sketches of Harrison masks and selling them to kids at school for $0.10 each. So I told Harrison I owe him probably 10 cents a mask.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I learned some terminology during the course of the interview, and the pretzel mask.
Yes.
And the bar mask. And I couldn't figure out what you guys were really discussing. And yeah, it's the same. But it's that first sort of primitive Ken Dryden mask is the best thing I could call it. It's not just a flat mask. It's just a bunch of bars.
Tubes,
sort of connected. Yeah. For
sure. And Dryden's the one that I think resonates with everybody. Certainly does for me. He was my hero growing up, but predates him as well by several well-known goaltenders. So,
and Greg, the best part about Greg is he's not shy about voicing an opinion, and you will know exactly where he stands on certain subjects, and also he played the position and has a really interesting career as sort of a pseudo e-bug. Back in the day with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you guys get into that. So it's a fascinating conversation about mask making, mask art, and the position of goaltending. And on the subject of equipment, Woody, Robin Lehner has had he's probably one of the most unique goaltenders in the NHL today when it comes to gear. He's worn one set of pads for warm-up, another set of pads for first period, and then gone back to the other pads for another period. Like, he flip-flops mid-game. Maybe not like during a period, but certainly during intermissions. And the other night, he wore his new Brian's pads straight out of the box without any practice, without any morning skate, put them on in warm-up, went out and posted a shutout. And how many goalies do you think would do that in the National Hockey League?
Well, it speaks to a couple things. It speaks to Robin Lehner and sort of the uniqueness and strength of his character and belief once he believes in something. I mean, this is a guy, to tie it into Greg Harrison, this is a guy who, when the Buffalo Sabres had their outdoor game, actually asked about the possibility of wearing one of those old school all fiberglass, no metal bar like right against your face, big chin style masks in the game. So,
and what happened with that?
Yeah, that was quickly shot down for safety concerns.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not the safest. I mean, it's funny because Greg mentioned John Garrett obviously now does color here in Vancouver, and he's told me stories about, those old masks, like they were so close to your face, you took one off there, it just broke your nose pretty much, and he'd have to have it reset on a semi-regular basis. So, but it also speaks to the relationship that Robin has built with Bryans and with Chris Joswiak, the pro rep. I mean, when he first looked at switching, that was not an easy process. He'd been in Vaughan for a long time. He relied on Vaughan not just to be broken in, but actually to break down. Like, he really does like a soft boot. When Brian sent him the first set of pads the first time to try, there was a set where he actually cut open the boot of the pads and cut up the foam in that bottom boot section to try and soften it. Because
no way.
He was
he broke the foam down?
Yeah, and then sent it back to them to sort of show them how soft he liked it. Because with his Vaughns, it wasn't so much even that he counted on them. I don't know that they were stuffed or not, to be honest with you, but they sure looked like they were. They were that soft. And he sort of counted on them not to be broken in, but to actually break down. And so they've developed to the point where they know what he likes. They can deliver what he likes right out of the box to the point where he's confident enough to wear it in a game. And, to me, that's a sign of a couple things. Like, it's a sign of a company being, reacting to the goaltender, a goaltender who, like I said, in the early going, I don't think they saw that as a partnership that was going to last, just because not often you got a guy in the NHL actually open up the pad and change
Ryan
the foam
Miller
inside. Yeah. Yes. And so to here we are today where he can grab a pair out of the box and wear them in a big game for the Vegas Golden Knights. Also credit, we've had him on the show before, to Chris Joswiak. You talk to guys around the league, the relationship, and I don't think I'm not sure, I think goalies understand this. Most fans probably don't. When it comes to goaltenders, there are some equipment managers with teams that also play the position and have strong relationships with the goalies on their team. But for the most part, the most important relationship a goalie has in terms of equipment is with his pro rep. And guys like Chris Joswiak for Brian's play a massive role in that. And so it's a credit to that and a credit to Lehner and the strength of sort of person that he is, that, hey, they felt good going on. I'm good in warm up. I'm going to wear them in a game and look good, feel good, play good, right? They certainly looked sharp out there. I love the little panda embroidery on the back of the strap and all those touches. So yeah, hey, it was nice. Can't wait to see what he comes up with for a mask. And it'll be nice when they get to the point where the Warrior Sticks match as well.
Okay, so how many, by the way, on the Warrior Stick, he's been named first star of both games that he's played for the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's given away his game stick, when they come out for the Star Loop, because I assume he's transitioning out of those colors into the Warrior Sticks that would have the Vegas Golden Knight colors. So for the time being, he's giving away his game sticks on the Star Twirl.
Well, we talked about this, I think, recently, where for the longest time, the model of Warrior that he liked didn't come in black. And so the equipment staff in Chicago was actually spray painting it black and having to do the lettering themselves. So I think the equipment staff in Vegas is probably hoping that he can get them in black with gold trim, because I don't think they'll be too excited about having to do their own lettering on those kits.
I want to get into the hockey shop because there's some stuff going on there, but just on the idea of taking a pair of pads and wearing them in a National Hockey League game straight out of the box. Do you know of anybody else that would do that? And
we've heard
and
this.
Just what made it possible?
Well, so there are some, Hutch. I think we have
Sure we have.
I'm curious to watch tonight. We've got massive playoff game implications tonight between the Vancouver Canucks and Arizona Coyotes. I'm at Rogers Arena right now as we record this. Thatcher Demko, the gloves were here for practice yesterday. The pads were still being unloaded. So as me and him were talking in the locker room, his new Brian's pads came in. He had them on the ice for morning skate this morning. And I'm curious, does he wear them in the game tonight, or does he need a couple skates in them? We've talked to a lot of guys. That was one of the things for years that guys loved about CCM, the consistency of the product. They all talked about how when they got it, it was the same as the last one. And for a lot of guys, some guys still needed time to break them in, but for a lot of guys, Roberto Luongo for one, there were quite often times where he just took them out of the box, wore them in practice that day, and whenever the next game was, he was ready to put them on. So I think there are still some, like, hey, like Jonathan Quick and Jack Campbell, their pads are so soft. Like it just takes time to get like again, it's not a rip on any company. It's just these goalies want them so soft that it's almost like they go beyond broken in. They're almost broken down. That's how they like them. Like you could grab Quick's pads and like a xylophone, you could squeeze them together, right? They're so soft. And there are still a few guys around, but I think increasingly, you think of Bauer with that one piece, the way the pad and the shape of the pad comes consistently the same every time. There are probably more and more guys around the league that can just grab a set, get on the ice and go.
And let's not forget, we've also on this podcast, I think it was the episode, Darren, when you spoke with Kay, was one goaltender in the league going through, wasn't it something like 24 sets of gloves in a season? So those aren't well broken down, that's for sure. Guys actually want that feel now of a new product.
Well, that's great insight because it was a real story, and maybe we overplayed it, but that's why we talked to Hutch and Woody over at InGoal Radio, the podcast, InGoal Magazine. The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com, with a lot going on as we enter the spring. Woody, give us an idea of what's happening over at Goalie Heaven.
Well, a couple key dates to keep in mind, folks. March 13th is the start of their annual end-of-season sale, and that's going to mean 20% off all Bauer Supreme Goal, all CCM Premier, all Warrior G4, all Vaughn V8, everything. We've talked about some of the sales over the past couple of weeks where they're looking to get rid of things like Premier 2 leg pads and gloves. Those are on right now. Bauer Supreme was on sale as well. Again, leg pads and gloves all through, senior, pro, and junior models. Well, now it's everything. Everything starting March 13th to the 29th. Get the shelves cleared out for the new stuff to come in April and May. So pretty much, you're talking not just pads and blockers, but sticks, chest protectors, pants, whatever you need. Wait till March 13th and check them out at thehockeyshop.com. It'll be on sale. And then the other key date to keep in mind, May 24th, that'll be Tendy Fest 5. Keep an eye on their social media channels for more details over the coming weeks. But that's the date to mark on your calendar, May 24th at Burnaby 8 Rinks in Vancouver. They got a lot of big names and big guests that are set to come. Of course, we'll be there, so that's all you really need to know. But those are the key dates. So May 24th, mark it on your calendar now for Tendy Fest 5, and keep an eye on the Hockey Shop and thehockeyshop.com March 13th for the end of season sale, and a lot of great savings across all brands.
Tendy Fest is a bucket list thing for me, and I got there and I was not disappointed. Just seeing all the gear that you could walk around and try on, and then add in the guests. Remember last year who stopped by? Tristan Jarry just happens to be lighting it up in the National Hockey League. I mean, it's
an InGoal bump right there.
InGoal bump for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And had a great chance to speak with Tristan Jarry, and that's the type of access, and along with the equipment and the reps and the people that you can lean on, fitness as well, training. There's a lot going on at Tendy Fest. So if you're in the Lower Mainland area in May, make sure that you are able to stop by Burnaby 8 Rinks. And March 13th is the end of season sale. I for one can't wait. You guys get all the good stuff early, but those of us that are still heading into the summer and looking for our league teams, it's going to be a fun time on March 13th.
You're always welcome to come and hang out with us and try the gear, Darren. Come on up.
No, you guys enjoy it. It's okay.
Well, I actually, it's funny. We've had the Bauer Ultrasonic out and about getting tested, and to tie it back to e-bugs and guys wearing gear the first time, like a lot of our testers, like they got to go in right onto the ice, and like not all these guys are beer leaguers. And so we had one guy who was supposed to wear it this week, and he got called up to a junior A team from junior B because they had an injury. And of course, as you mentioned off the top, Darren, junior hockey is in its playoffs. And so he was so eager to try it out that he said, well, I can take it and I can wear it for warm-ups as the backup in a junior A playoff game. He's going to wear it on the ice the first time on the ice. And I'm like, that might not be the best way to try a very unique, very different product from what you're used to for the first time. But just goes to show you how eager guys are to have the new stuff. We've been testing the Bauer Ultrasonic. It looks, from a message I saw from CCM, like our CCM Axis is on the way. So might be worth a visit to come up here and check it out, Darren. And on the note of the hockey shop, we may get all the good stuff for free, but and for our testing purpose, of course, not for our personal use. But when I do need stuff, I get it from the hockey shop. Picked up a couple items the other day. After 6 years, my Warrior Jock finally saw the end of its life cycle, and I picked up another Warrior Jock strap. So plug to the product. Not a company we do a lot of direct work with, but that doesn't mean it's a bad product. Like that Jock, picked up another one. I do actually pay retail every once in a while there, and I know that's going to shock you.
Not as much as it shocks Hutch, but we'll let it slide for
hey,
this
and
time.
one more note. The other thing I bought was a second set of Brian's smart cords. We've talked about those before.
You did?
I did to use on another set of pads. And, again, we've talked about how I had to wait on that one because it's been such a popular item the way we've talked about it that they've sold out twice. But for those who are waiting for the shipment to come back in, they've just got a new one in both white and black at thehockeyshop.com. So if you've been waiting on that, go buy them now.
The idea that the hockey shop has both the traditional, what you'd think of, the pads, the gloves, the pants, but also the accessories is a great source for all your goaltending needs. And that's the subject of our gear segment this week.
Welcome back to the Hockey Shop, source for sports out here in beautiful Surrey, British Columbia. Of course, you can always find them online at thehockeyshop.com. Down here, as usual, in goalie heaven for a little in-person time with Cam Matwiv, the poor SOB who now, after I leave, has to go around and put all the gloves back on the shelves, all the pads back on the shelves, the masks, all the things that I take off and try. Cam, I apologize for that, but I do thank you for your time today. What are we going to talk about? What's the hot topic today? What's the next thing as we gear up for the launch of new gear in April? What are we chatting about today?
So this is something that specifically applies to me currently right now because I'm actually having a little bit of problems, and it's grip for your stick.
I thought it was because it's called butt ends and you're a bit of a butt. Never mind.
Womp womp. No, but why I'm thinking of something like this and why I think it's great that we should be talking about it is like currently, the tape on my stick has become really gummed up and is really slick. And rather than retaping it, which I probably should, and I'm lazy because I hate taping my stick, this product in particular, where I'm holding up butt ends, something that actually slides onto the top end of the shaft of your stick and replaces that tape butt end that you would do, but it becomes more permanent, and it's actually a full grip around it, so it'll react a little bit with your blocker. Really great control of the top end of your stick, especially for taking shots and whatnot.
So it's textured. I took it out of the case, and which means one more thing you have to put away after we leave here today. I took it out of the case, grabbed it. Like you said, it's kind of a preformed rubber grip. If you think of a golf grip, and as a guy who golfs and knows the importance of getting regripped, getting your clubs regripped on an annual, if not every second year at the most basis, like grip matters. This has got a nice texture to it. It has obviously the, sort of the large butt end, for lack of a better term, at the end, the sort of goalie knob at the end. It's easy to apply. I mean, we've never used this, so we're leaning on your expertise here. What do goalies seem to like about this product? We've seen it obviously online a little bit. I noticed the other day that you sold it in store. What is it that attracts goalies to this beyond the simplicity and the consistency of the knob? They don't have to be like Malcolm Subban and do 38 turns every time to get the same knob. When you buy this, it's the same every time.
You really kind of hit it on the head there already. It is the ease of simplicity. They're super easy to apply. It basically comes with an adhesive spray. So you'll spray the end of the shaft of the stick, slide the grip on, you're good to go. It stays anchored.
I was going to say, so that's a new stick, pretty easy. What if you got a stick that did have tape on it before? Maybe there's a little bit of residue. Do you just clean it off and simple, or?
For the most part, yeah, I would try to get as much of that off as possible. That's where it might be a little bit more difficult, especially if there's some gunk on there and whatnot before. But it is kind of designed to go hand in hand. New stick, new butt ends kind of idea.
Okay. And in terms of taking it off and, you break your favorite stick and you come down here to the hockey shop, or you go to thehockeyshop.com and you want to transfer the butt end to a new stick, is that possible, or do you need to buy a new butt end?
Ideally, with the way consumerism works in the world, They are kind of recommending you buy a new one. I haven't personally tried to take one off. I've heard guys be able to do it before. But kind of reading between the lines, it is meant to be, new stick, new butt ends, new stick, new butt end.
Okay. I mean, and the reality is for most of us, sticks last a long time. So that's not an unreasonable thing.
For most.
For most. I mean, some of us have fits of anger and smash them over posts. Some of us have a little bit of an issue that way. What can I say? Okay, so and retail price on this is $29.99. Comes in a variety of colors, so you can go matchy and look super slick. Much we talked Padskins last week. You got to match the team. You've got a bunch of different colors here. You can find these in person here at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports or online at hockeyshop.com. But it's not the only sort of instant grip you have here. You've got one from Tacky Mac that is a lot cheaper at $9.99 compared to the $29.99 price point of the butt end, but a little lesser of a product as well. Not as much texture to it. Doesn't come with the spray for application, so you're kind of on your own there. Is this just sort of, for lack of a better term, just a cheaper version? Have you tried this one?
Not necessarily, no. It's just, I would say, another alternate option. Yeah, you lose a little bit of the texture, but you still have that same style of rubber grip. Not
as rounded. It's like the butt end's grip is kind of refined. It's got it nice and rounded. A little bit of texture on it. This one's a little more squared off, like if you were taping a stick.
Correct. Yeah, it almost looks like tape to a bit of a degree. There's obviously a couple more colors because they are full colored as well. Whereas the butt ends remains mostly white, and it's just the accent colors that change. For the command grip applications, a little bit more labor intensive. It actually comes with an adhesive strip that you make wet and then put it on the stick and then slide the grip on. Just through experience, that has been it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. But it will go on. It just takes a little bit to get there.
Okay, so basically you got to put in a little more personal elbow grease to get this one on securely.
Yes.
Okay, but if you're looking to save some money, that's an option there. You just don't again, just not quite as clean an application process, not quite as refined a product. You don't get that as much of that grip as you do with the butt ends. Okay, so there we go.
Exactly.
That's how you. So we're doing all these videos at InGoal of all these different NHL goalies showing us how they tape their sticks. And you're basically selling a product that makes it so they don't have to.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this, especially since we got actually readers telling us their kids are watching the videos and retaping their sticks like 4 times. So what we should be concentrating on is the fact that I am increasing your stick tape budget as opposed to you selling products that undercuts my ability to run these videos. So I'm fake angry at you, Cam. I'm just kidding. Thanks for taking the time to walk us through butt ends and command grip, your option to get an easy grip on the end of your stick, consistent knob every time. Cam, the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports, thehockeyshop.com. If anybody has questions on colors, applications, or sticks because they need them, where can they get a hold of you?
At 604-589-8299.
Perfect. Butt ends from the ultimate butthead, Cam Matwiv here at the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports. You thought I was going to go somewhere else with that, didn't you? Dude, our audience is too young to even know what that is. Okay. From the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports, until next time and the next latest great gear innovation, thanks, Cam, for your time.
Thanks.
That's a great product, and it comes. I mean, there's some that obviously you can get different sizes in, and different products with color. But just curious, because tape, you have the flexibility of color and changing. The National Hockey League does have that rule about a white butt end. Any concerns? Any thoughts on that?
The butt ends product is actually white with just like a little bit of colored trim, and I don't think, as a matter of fact, we've seen NHL goaltenders use it without having to wrap white tape around it, so that's not a problem. The other product I talked about there is a solid one color piece, so I mean, you can get it white, you can get it blue. They had pink, they had red, they had green, they had all kinds of colors in stock. I guess if you use that and you make it to the National Hockey League, you got to wrap a piece of white tape around the knob at the end, because the rules say it needs to be white. But I got to be honest with you. I mean, I've actually been in the locker room and had that conversation. I think I was the one who let Thatcher Demko know when he went to his black stick for the Canucks Retro Night that he couldn't use that black tape all the way up to the knob. And yet, you know, recently, I think it might have been his Maple Leafs debut, I watched Jack Campbell play the whole game with a solid blue knob. So it seems to be one of those rules, and we'll have to get Kay to give us an answer on this, whether it's just a matter of the referee noticing or not, or whether the other team has to raise it as an issue. Otherwise, it at times, I got to be honest with you, it seems to be so random. And, maybe I'm missing something, but frankly, it seems to be a little bit asinine that it's a rule in general. No?
Antiquated. I understand why before video review and high def and et cetera, that a goal judge may think that a butt end could be a puck. But nowadays, it's one of those ones that, hey, if we're going to change offside, we can let that one just run its course and go out to pasture.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So as we talk about progress there, let's step back in time and go through the world of mask making and the evolution of what we wear to protect our faces and our heads, from the old days of nothing at all to the most primitive and initial phase of Jacques Plante, and into the guru of mask making. Greg Harrison spent a good deal of time with David Hutchison discussing his time in the business, his time around the world of hockey and goaltending in particular.
I grew up as a goaltender in the early 70s when we all wore fiberglass masks with iconic bold designs on them. And recently I bumped into arguably the most famous mask maker and artist of all time. Our guest today on the InGoal Radio Podcast is Mr. Greg Harrison. Greg's clients are a who's who of 70s, 80s, 90s goaltending. Too many to name here, but literally hundreds of pro goaltenders from Gratton to Rutherford, Liu, Davidson, Potvin, Belfour, Curtis Joseph, many more. He was an innovative artist, but he's also the man behind the combo cage we all wear today as a builder. He was a pro rep for Cooper, as a collector of vintage gear. He was even a practice goaltender who nearly had his own David Ayers moment, something we'll get to a little bit later in our chat. But, it feels like we're only going to scratch the surface, but let's dig in. How did it all begin?
I basically started when I was going to high school, and I had a fellow that was a year older than me that played at Neil McNeil High School, named Doug Hutchison, and his dad, Ken, had made his mask. And at the time, you either wore an ill-fitting store-bought mask or you attempted to make your own. Now, they showed me how they did it, and I attempted a couple of, I wouldn't call them futile attempts, but knowing now what I know about masks, they weren't very good, but they were at least a start. And I loved Terry Sawchuk and the design, although I wasn't familiar with how the design was done. I made my attempt to copy it, and from the Hutchisons had instructed me, and I made two versions of that. Unfortunately, I was going with a girl, trying to impress her at one point, and gave a pair of homemade goalie gloves and that original mask to him to use, to play road hockey. And unfortunately, they got stolen out of his garage, and God knows where that one is. But the second one was virtually identical, which I still have. And then after that, when I was going to, when I played for Toronto Nats, another probably not as well known, but to me just as famous, a mask maker was a fellow by the name of Roy Weatherby. And he had done the early, I always call them bar masks, but everyone seems to assign the name pretzel masks to them. He did Doug Favell, Bernie Perrant, Dunk Wilson, Jacques Caron, those early pretzel masks. And his son Wayne was again a year ahead of me, playing for Toronto Nats. And I had talked to him and asked him to show me the techniques that he used. He made the full fiberglass ones as well as the bar masks. And he didn't have to, and I certainly appreciate that he did, but he showed me the proper kind of resins for strength and flexibility. and basically got me started into making a strong mask, because the initial masks that I made were made of Canadian Tire repair kits for your
Oh, really?
for your car. And knowing now with the resins and glass that I use now and have used all along, it was just a functional fiberglass product. It certainly had no strength or flexibility characteristics to it. And so I started then initially making a couple more masks for myself out of what he had taught me. And at the time, I didn't have my own design yet. And so when everyone requested a mask, they would say, I want one that looks like Lefty Wilson's mask out of Detroit, or I want an Ernie Higgins style mask out of Boston, or the goalie like Jockerman, or somebody's mask that they recognize. And then the Esposito style, which was the Plant style he wore in St. Louis, the one he got hit in the head with a slap shot from Stanfield. So there were those masks that people liked, and I would make those. What really got me going in masks was I worked for 4 summers at the Bobby Orr Mike Walton Sport Camp in Aurelia.
Okay.
And I was a goalie instructor there. And then I started to make masks for kids. Very simple, very crude by today's standards, but that's what sort of got.
So what year is that about?
What years? I was there from 68 to 72.
Okay.
And then
you got your first NHL client from there?
Yes, Jim Rutherford and John Garrett were both at the camp as goalie instructors, and they both tried mine. Rutherford was with Pittsburgh then, and he asked for a mask like Jockerman's, which was an Ernie Higgins style mask, which I painted blue for him to be in Pittsburgh. And because when he played for Hamilton Red Wings, and then when he went to Detroit first, he wore a Lefty Wilson mask that was painted red, just plain red. So when he went to Pittsburgh, I did a solid color of this sort of aquamarine blue that I actually used a paint that was used for boats that I found. And that's what it was. And then Garrett was playing for the Portland Buckaroos then in the minors, and I did one for him, also a more full coverage Ernie Higgins style mask. And then as time went on, I did Rutherford's then.
Well, sorry, if we can, I mean, Rutherford, you started with the blue. You did the one in Detroit for him too, though, and wasn't that was really an important mask in a sense, that when you went from the solid color to the design you did there, and he wasn't super happy about what you did, was he?
No, initially, well, I don't think it was that he wasn't happy of what I did. I think the case was he had been with Detroit. They traded him to Pittsburgh, and then he got traded back to Detroit, and he didn't want to go back to Detroit.
Okay.
But what happened was it just so happened that they were playing in Toronto a couple days later. Once he got traded from Pittsburgh, Detroit was playing in Toronto. So I actually picked it up. He arranged for me to pick it up at the flower shop of the Skyline Hotel then near the airport. He knew somebody there, and I picked up the mask, had to sand it down because it was getting kind of beat up at that point. Sanded it down, painted it white. And at that time I had started to put colored straps on any mask I was making, depending on the color. The masks were then attached with elastic and a buckle and a leather strap. So I had red straps made. I put it on the mask and I hung it up. I was doing it in my parents' garage at the time. And I hung it up and I went, it looks pretty plain, pretty boring. So there was a product back then you could get for doing illustrations of anything, basically illustrating a car, piece of furniture, whatever, and it was called MacDac.
I remember it. My father used it for me.
Yeah. So it basically would let you see, before computers and everything else, what it was going to look like. So I cut out these two wings roughly, placed them over the eyes, and hung them up at the end of my parents' garage. And I thought, that looks pretty good. So I took it off, and then I drew it by hand and then painted the wings on it and brought it to him the next morning. And like, he didn't make a big deal about not liking it, but he wasn't that happy that he was a player that didn't like a lot of attention. He just did his job, and that was it. And I think it got him a lot of attention. And initially, if there was any trepidation on his part, it soon changed to appreciation, because he liked it, and it stayed, and people liked it, and it added a little more color to the game rather than just plain colors or stripes or whatever. It gave something to the masks. And then as time went on, being in Toronto, when Favell got traded to Toronto, I did his mask. He had the famous pumpkin orange mask, the Halloween prank in Philadelphia, and
Right.
and then the Starburst done on it. They were both done by Frank Lewis, the equipment manager for the Flyers. And then when Favell got traded to Toronto, initially that same mask got painted white. And Frank told me, he said he went out to the front of his house, pulled off a maple leaf off one of his trees, laid it on the forehead, traced it out, and painted the leaf over the top of the forehead with the stem on the middle of the nose. Now, when I talked to Favell trying to get him to try it, I did more full head mask and then put the leaf right in the middle. And then even after I finished it initially, I got it back at one point and made the leaf a little bigger. And then I made him another one altogether, which he then used even after when he went to Colorado. And the leaf encompassed more of the face. And I did Dunk Wilson's in a Starburst mask, both of those guys with Toronto. After that, when Wayne Thomas came to Toronto, that's when I developed my own angular mask to deflect the pucks. Not just a functional piece of fiberglass. It was designed to deflect the puck, which most people recognize as the Thomas mask or the Liu mask or the Wayne Stevenson mask or Gary Smith.
So before we dive into that too much, just let's remind everybody, because we obviously have a lot of listeners who weren't around in the 60s and 70s to see the development of the mask, but it used to be that you would just mold a guy's head and build a mask to that shape, and they were all fairly round, as I recall, fairly smooth. So then what gave you the idea that we wanted to change that a little bit? And I mean, this was a huge innovation that still holds today.
I can't take full credit for that, because just prior to me, a couple of years prior to that change in the design, there was a fellow named Jacques Plante that was around. You may have heard.
Yes.
You may have heard of him.
I might have heard of him, and I wore one of his masks too as a child.
That when he came to Toronto, that's when they had just developed the Plante mask meant to deflect the shots more, and the idea was there, to take the major impact away by deflection. A funny story with Plante: I had never met him prior to me having somebody request a mask. I did a few that looked like the Plante mask, and I would have been 18 then, and I made a mask that looked like Plante. Went down to a leaf practice, wanted to see what he thought of it, and I had it sitting on the boards at practice, and he skated by slowly and looked at the mask and just kept going. And then he skated around again, and as he got towards me and the mask sitting on the boards, he said, "You make another one of those masks and I will sue you."
No kidding.
And that was my first experience with Jacques. And then the next time I saw him in person, was in Philadelphia when he was the goal coach for Perrant and Phil Meir. And I was fitting Phil Meir with a cage combination that I had made. And I was adjusting the straps and the chin strap. And he come over and he sat beside me. And he looked at the mask and he goes, "That's the best mask I ever see for the goaler." And he got up and he walked.
Oh,
and
nice.
he walked away. And that was the only 2 times I ever had any meeting with him or, got to talk to him at all.
Yeah.
And that was it. So,
wow.
but,
So do you develop a business like this just because word gets around? It's word of mouth between the guys in the league?
yeah, well, what happened, when I did, I wanted to have a mask that sort of was like a plant mask at that time, but I wanted my own design. And Dryden had his mask made, the most famous one that he's known for. He had
Ken Dryden is in Montreal,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, he had
because Dave will come into the story later. Yeah. His brother.
And the mask that he had was actually made by another fellow named James Homus out of Ottawa, who had done a lot of the early WHA masks because of the locale that he was in there with Ottawa having a team. He was a firefighter. And the mask he made for Dryden, he made the shell, but it was cut out and painted by a friend of Ken's named Carl Lamb. And the design, although interesting, to me had way too many holes in it, like way too many triangles. It was an interesting design, but if you see the mask, it's beat to hell, like a lot of the earlier ones did, because they didn't change them every 3 weeks like they do now for a new paint job.
For sure.
But they were used and well used, and they weren't protected by a mask bag. They were just thrown in the bag with all the rest of your equipment and traveled and got use and hit. So there's a certain amount of fiberglass that's got to be there to protect you. So I like the rounded edge triangle idea as a design. So I developed a shape that used the sort of interlocking rounded edge triangles, used them along the edge the same way, and then up above the forehead. So it gave you a mask that gave you a deflection technique and was good and strong. And then for fellows, you were asking about word of mouth. I had done Thomas's, and then I had to deliver a mask. I did a mask for Dennis Herron in Pittsburgh, and it was a smaller style Higgins mask. He had worn a mask, whatever it was, whoever made it. He got hit and the mask literally split in half. And they called me. Dennis could barely speak English at the time. And he called me and they sent him to a hotel in by the airport. I did his mold and then he flew back to Pittsburgh. But he called me and he goes, "Hello, Greg Harrison, Dennis Aaron, Pittsburgh Penguins. You make my mask?" That's all he said. And I used a bit of my high school French to converse with him and did the mask. And I delivered it to the Atlanta trainer, Norm Mackey, in Toronto before a game. And as a result of doing that, I did Phil Mears in Atlanta. Then it just started to. I would go down and see players in Buffalo and Detroit and Toronto, and introduce myself and talk to them about masks and show them my product. And the one thing that I did, Roy Weatherby had showed me the proper kind of resins and everything to use, but the masks were still very crude, strong as hell, but not finished. Rough edges in many cases. And I believe that when you got hit, you want to reduce the chance of anything cutting you as much as possible. So my masks were done, sanded inside and out, finished completely. And then once they were finished, I seal them again with a layer of resin and then wet sand them, and then they're ready for paint. So there was no rough edges on mine at all. And I think that's what sort of impressed people, as well as the fit. because the fit was very important.
So if we could just step back a second and again, for the folks who aren't as familiar with the time period, the idea of the angles, you talked about deflecting and angles. Some of those original masks were a little bit more like a player's helmet today, in the sense that you could get an impact and it would be fairly sort of straight onto a flat surface or a flatter surface.
Yeah.
And the idea of the angles on the mask is to make sure that as many impacts as possible are simply at an angle, deflecting off, so you're not absorbing the full impact. Was that the concept?
Yes, and also the importance of a fit, because of the custom mask. And this is what Roy taught me is, when you've got something made for your face, it's better than having something that's not made for your face, because where you've got any kind of pressure is where you're going to take the impact. Now, in theory, that works, and it does work for the most part, but you still have a mask that's sitting right on your face. There was
because there were no foams. There were no foams. It was fiberglass on face, right?
Well, in the case of Ernie Higgins, he did put foam in. His earlier ones didn't have as much. If you look at early shots of Cheevers, the mask is much more close to his face, where the later ones and the ones that he made for like Eddie Johnson and so on, there was foam in it, and the production mask that he did, like Jim Craig's, for instance, is a Higgins mask, and there's padding in it. Where mine, I used very little padding, mostly over the forehead, and that was it. Little strips on the forehead. Now, once I made the cage combination mask, I was still wearing the older one. I hadn't made one for myself, and I had a Liute style one on. And Nick Boynton, who played for Boston, his dad Neil played in the league with me up in Bolton, Ontario, and he came in one day and he got all of a slap shot just inside the circle, and I only had time to basically wince and try and get out of the way. And when I did, it pulled my eyebrow down into the eye hole area, and it just laced me wide open. I was cut. And I'll never forget when I went to the hospital. You're in the waiting room waiting to see the doctor, and the nurse will chat you up and say, what do you do for a living, and blah blah blah. And I said I made goalie masks, and you could hear her go into the next room talking to the doctor, and she says, and you know what he does? He makes goalie masks. And and I'm cut right off.
Not a lot of those.
Yeah. So the next week I wore a cage and helmet, and the following week I had a cage combination mask made for myself, and never been.
Okay. So this is a big step here. Yeah, this is a big step here. So you were in sort of that traditional fiberglass composite mask that we all see as iconic, and now you're just throwing in here the cage combo, but that's the mask we see today. This is a huge innovation here. So tell us a little bit more about that. What year are we talking about now? And then tell me a little bit about the thinking process here.
77 was the year. At that point I had been making other cage combinations for other guys, but I hadn't finished one for myself. To go back to the beginning of the cage competition, It was when I was working for Cooper as the pro rep. I was making masks for other guys, and always just the fiberglass ones. The cage combination wasn't around then. Okay. Dave Dryden, who is Ken's brother, really doesn't get enough notoriety or attention for modifying a lot of equipment that ended up coming around. And he would come in to Cooper and he'd say, for instance, on a catching glove, do we need all this leather everywhere? Can we not lighten it up? And he'd say, put some nylon on the back of the catching glove, make the cuff out of nylon with the same padding, but with nylon instead of leather. Make the palm still leather, make the strap still leather. And he'd have a glove made And then the next thing you know, it's in the line for the next year, but he never got credit for it. The arm pads and chest protector combination is as a result of him tinkering around with things and making adjustments to it. The same with the nylon on the pads, including nylon on the front of the pads as well as the sides, which didn't work.
I remember that.
I remember I was playing for York, and they were wanting just to try different things at different times. And they brought a pair of these all nylon pads one day, and you'd make a double leg pad slide, to make it safe. And you just keep sliding into the corner because there was nothing to stop it. And I said, these are no good. Get rid of these. Anyways, I'm getting a little off subject here. Dave came in one day, and I just happened to be up in the design department talking about something else. Dave came in, and he had the front half of an SK600 helmet. He had the cage, an HM30 cage on the front of it, and a back piece from one of his masks. He said, I want a mask that'll fit like a fiberglass mask, but it'll give me the eye protection of the cage. And the design department said, oh, no, it's got to be a helmet. We won't make that. I said, Dave, I'll design that. So that's how it came about. And what I did is I made the shell. I basically, it's never changed from the forehead area where it had an area for the foam and the sweatband and the angles to deflect the puck above the eyes. The sides and the bottom changed, and the configuration of the cage changed. I had two separate custom cages made at the time, which I ended up using one on Dave's and used another one on one I did for Ken. And then after that, I knew it was going to get expensive to make them
because of
the cage. It was a premium to get something custom made. There was no jigs or anything. They just made these up. And it was done by a company that had done the cages for Cooper at the time. And so what I did then was the subsequent ones, I modified how the bottom fit because I wasn't satisfied with the arrangement I had in the chin, and I knew it wasn't sort of optimum for the protection because you still were taking a major impact in the chin. So originally I had foam built up there to kind of add a cushion, but I knew that it wasn't good enough. So then I started to use, in the other redesigned ones, I started to use like a football
chin cup.
Yeah, but it wasn't at the right angle for the most part, and it was cutting into guys underneath their lip. So then I got a foam chin piece out of another type of helmet, and I trimmed it and shaped it the way I wanted, and then I had them made that way, and that's what became the norm. And that's what you need. You need something that's both protective from a cushion standpoint and acts as a suspension. So it virtually makes the whole mask absorb the shock the way a full face mask would, but with better protection. And and then I used an HM30 cage for the longest time, and I cut it down, but it was never at the right angle, and it was never, they changed the design of it and made a flimsy center bar, which I didn't like, and it stuck out way too far. And when I did Alan Vester's mask, a cage combination in Toronto, he said, can we not make the cage closer so it's not as interfering with my sight lines? Because if you got something that sticks out far from your face, it's always going to be there. But as you bring it closer, your eyes look beyond that. You don't even see it. It disappears. Right. So I then took, along with a steel wire company, designed my own cage out of stainless steel and made a jig myself. And then they would let me come in and weld it together. And I made my own cages from then on, and I always have.
And that's the mask we see today everywhere.
Yeah.
In
It was
essentially, isn't it?
the
Yeah.
cages. I made two styles of cages. One with a long cage, and then one with that you'll see that goes down and splits. The center bar splits, so you got that sort of V design at both top and the bottom. Potvin, for instance, is a long cage. Belfour's was a long cage, and basically I started initially. It was it went just to the ear, and then it would go up over the forehead, and then I made them so they went back further beyond the ear and up higher on the top, and with the back piece there was nothing left by chance to get hit in the head. You were covered everywhere.
Which really allowed them to get certified.
They wouldn't certify them originally. When I brought them to CSA and heck in the States, they said, no, we'll never pass this. It's got to be a helmet. I said, no, it's not going to be a helmet. It never will be a helmet. This is what's safe for a goalie. It's designed for a goalie by a goalie. And you don't look straight ahead. You don't look straight down to the ice. Your neck is kind of kinked back. So you need that flexibility in the back of your head. So the back piece, which I built ridges into, so if they fell, you weren't falling directly on the skull either.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, no, we won't ever pass this. And I figured, okay, fine. I never bothered to protect myself because I figured they were going to never let me, produce it. And after 2 years of making it for the NHL, nobody was getting hurt, no concussions, no cuts with anyone wearing that style of mask. And then a friend of mine who was still a designer at Cooper's, his name was Len Clement. He said to me, CSA is looking at passing your kind of mask now. You should go to the meetings. And I went, and there was already 4 guys trying to copy me, and they wouldn't. Wouldn't.
So sorry, when you said before you didn't bother to protect yourself, you meant with a
patent. No.
Yeah.
I wish I had $1 for everyone that's produced right now. I would be sitting pretty,
I guess
but,
so.
They wouldn't listen to me at the CSA meetings. They kept, their test is to take and mount it on a bar and slam it in the side of a bench. That's their idea of testing it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you got to put something inside these that'll measure how much impact is being transferred to the brain. I can have a hunk of steel that's strong as hell, but it's not going to stop a puck. It's not going to protect you.
No.
And they wouldn't listen to me. And these other guys are all trying to pick my brain. And I just said, go ahead, you do whatever you want. I'm out of here. I went to like 4 meetings, and that was the end of it. And they ended up passing them. So that's a bit of history that not many people know.
That's a great bit of history. Thank you. If we could just step back here a little bit to some of the more famous artwork that you've done. And for me, it has to be the Gilles Gratton mask, the lion. And can you talk to me a little bit about Gratton's mask, the inspiration, and maybe a little bit about the man as well?
He was a character. Anybody that played with him will tell you the same thing. I had spoken to him prior to doing his mask about making him one, and he didn't really give me an answer either way. He said he'd think about it. And what happened, he was with the Rangers at this time, and in a game on a Sunday night, I believe it was, he ended up wearing 3 masks. The Hometh mask that he had out of Ottawa, and 2 different cage ones. He wore a Jaffa, I believe. And I don't even know what the other one. Probably it may be a Cooper with an HM30 or something on the front. But he actually wore 3 masks, 1 for each period in that game, and he lost.
Wow.
And he lost. So what happened was he called me right after the game, and he said, I want to come and get a mask molded by you. I said, okay. So he flew in. I met him at the airport on a Tuesday, brought him to my house, did his mold. And then when we were done doing the mold, I said, have you got anything you might want to tell me about doing a design? I got a thing in mind. I said, have you got a nickname? He said, my nickname is the Count. He thought he was account from back in the day, and that was
reincarnated, right?
Yes, and
Yeah,
and then
past life.
I said I can do something to do with the Rangers, or I said, what's your astrological sign? He says, I'm a Leo. I said, okay.
There you go.
I said, he's done interviews where, he thought he was a reincarnated jungle cat. Well, he might have thought, but that's not what was in the conversation with me. It was just simply the Leo.
Okay.
So I ran with the Leo design. And what I did was I finished the mask literally, the Tuesday I did the mold. The mask was finished at midnight on a Friday night, the actual shell. Then I started the paint, and the paint was done like an oil painting. It wasn't airbrush. That's all done by hand with urethane paints done, as I said, like an oil painting. It took me 12 hours, 12 hours to paint it. I finished it at noon the next day. I had what I called my little easy bake oven, which was just a little two element oven with a little oven underneath, and that's what I use to speed things up, to dry the mask a little quicker. I just use it to warm the mask and dry the paint quickly. Put it together, put it in a box, and at that time you could go literally to the airport, and in essence you're almost buying a seat on the airplane to get the box to an express delivery the next day in New York. Actually, it arrived that night. And then he went and picked it up. Apparently, this is where I have to rely on his version of it. He had it in the box under his bench, and that night he went out in the warm-up wearing something else. And then when the game started, he put the mask on, came out wearing the mask, and it got more press. The next day, it was all over the papers. It was in an issue of Time magazine on the same page as the Queen one day. It
was a massive leap forward.
Yeah, well, it was crazy because I didn't even think about it. I just did it, And I went to see him one time and in Toronto when New York came in, and he literally was doing an interview with the microphone up to the mask. He was wearing the mask doing the interview. And that's how much press he got for it. And he had a beard at the time, and there's a few shots. I just found one the other day. I'd never seen this angle, and it shows him snarling, like with the mask beside his face. So he almost looks like it. A couple of years ago, or about a year and a half ago, there was a book on Gilles done by Greg Oliver, and I went to the book launch, and Gilles signed a copy to me and said to Greg, "Thanks very much for doing this mask for me. People remember me because of you." So
that's awesome.
Cool.
Grattouni the Loony, The Wild, Unpredictable Life of Gilles Gratton is the book. Yeah. We'll leave a link to that in our show notes.
One time they the story goes there was a concert the night before, and in between periods one day they're trying to find Gratton. They can't find him anywhere, and he's not in the dressing room. And they go outside, and there's Gratton and his goalie equipment on a piano, playing the piano down the hallway. So
that's awesome. There's also a story of him wearing nothing but a jock and a helmet on the ice, isn't that right? A mask, I should say.
That one I don't know, but I'm sure other people could confirm that one.
Is there a mask what would be your top 3 of the ones that you've done?
Oh God,
your favorites.
That's always very difficult. I mean, there are ones I definitely did not like because of certain situations that happened with them. But of ones I like, I'd have to say Belfour is one. The first 2 Belfours that I did, like with him, he was Ed Belfour before I did his mask. After I did his mask, he was Eddie the Eagle. He had, when we discussed what what he said he'd like on the mask. He wanted a hawk, like the regular hawk bird. And I said to him,
Right.
the hawk, unfortunately, Eddie, is a mottled feathered bird. It doesn't stand out at all. It's not going to look that good. I said, how about we do an eagle against the red and black background? It'll look really good. So he said, okay. And at that time, it was around the 88 Olympics where the unsuccessful ski jumper, Eddie the Eagle, had been
Of course.
around. And I'm told that Keenan started calling Belfour Eddie the Eagle, and it just caught, and he made that his sort of moniker from then on. The other one that I liked was Potvin. It went through a few transitions initially. There's about 3 or 4 that a lot of people don't even know. The evolution of the one with the teeth. Originally, it started based on one of the characters from the show Cats. I used part of the features of that to initially start Felix's mask, and then I involved it into the teeth. And then everywhere he went, I kept the same. That was the other thing that I always tried to do, is try to give a goalie an identity, and it stayed with him. So that people, no matter where it was seen in the stands, on the television, in press, you could tell that was so-and-so's mask, because that's him. And nowadays,
and I missed that. That was great.
Yeah.
The being able to see that. There's a few guys still doing that, but nothing like,
not many.
Like when you started.
Not many. I mean, they changed masks like crazy. I could never get that much mask approval, from teams. They were also cheap most of the time, and they never wanted to pay for things like Joseph's St. Louis mask, the
Right.
trumpet. It took 11 months for them to pay for that mask, and I changed a couple cages on it, would touch up the paint job, put new foam in it, and as I said, I never charged them for any of that.
Do you ever look at guys today? I mean, just talking about that and the trend of giving people a personality. Do you ever look at guys today and sort of pull out the sketchbook and wonder what you might do for someone like a Freddie Anderson, or, I mean, I say that because you're in Toronto, but what if you were painting today for someone in the show?
I wouldn't.
Any ideas?
I wouldn't change much as far as my style, because I think it was important. The problem is, and I never took a lot of input from the players. In fact, most of them would just say, you go ahead and do something, which was good for me, because I never liked doing sketches first. I only did it in a few occasions. And the problem is, the design would evolve as I'm trying to do it on the mask. The curvature of the mask, the shape of the mask, the way the holes might be located would alter the design, and I'd always change it a bit to work with that. Or I would, if I really had it laid out first, I would lay out the design prior to doing the holes, and I'd move the holes. Well, keeping the same design, I might move them half an inch or a quarter of an inch, and it wouldn't be drastic, but it makes the design flow a lot better. And I felt by doing a design ahead of time and getting an approval on a flat paper draft, that it might not turn out that way. It might not look the same once you lay it on the mask. So I really haven't. I think I would sort of, the way I've seen some of the masks done now, there's a few airbrush artists that I really like. I love Todd Miska's stuff. He painted along similar lines to me.
Definitely a distinctive style.
Yeah. Eye Candy Air.
Steve Nash in Toronto as well.
I like his work. Jesse in the Massachusetts area, I like his. Stillabrush, I like their work. But there's a lot of very talented airbrush artists that are out there, but they they go a little too far. And I don't profess to be a great airbrush artist. I was at best sort of a beginner airbrush artist, I call myself, because I basically used an airbrush in like an industrial way where I just enhance things by airbrushing. Like I never could quite master it. I never liked the lack of control that you had with the airbrush. Like it would like get away from you and do what you didn't want it to do. And I never liked that. I wished I could sort of practice a little more and do it. And I might, if I had I've seen masks today and they're done similar to what I would have done. The latest one that I saw that I liked was, nobody got to see it because it was done right at the end. It was Hutchison's, the one that was done in Toronto. There was a mask that was done. I don't know who did that one, but I liked the way the design was, and they sort of shadowed the leaf done in a certain way. It was edged like it was faceted, like it was raised off the mask. It was kind of cool.
I may get it wrong, but I know that one of his painters has been David Leroux out of Montreal, who does in many ways remind me of some of the stuff that you did, because it's got a very bold look to everything that he does.
Well, that was the thing that I always tried to do. Like you want it to be distinctive so you can see what it is. And that was the idea, that most of my designs were like 3/4 over the top. So you could see the design on television, because that's the angle for the most part that it's shot at. And you could see what it was, as I said earlier, from the stands, from photographs. But now, like, you'll focus in on a lot of these guys, and there's so much going on, and there's not enough separation between what's going on there, and you can't tell what it is, in addition to it being a dog's breakfast. And it's really not, I don't mean to offend anybody, but there's just too much going on.
Well, I mean, you've credited lots of the current artists as people that you really enjoy, so I don't think you're offending. One of the things I enjoy about a lot of the current ones, and I agree about the detail from far, but many of the artists you mentioned have this way of creating a design that from one distance you can certainly see and recognize, but then the closer you get, more elements are revealed.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that level of detail.
Yeah. Well, I just, like, to me, it's too much on what it's being used on. That's basically, like, and there are a lot of, there's a lot of guys that are, I wouldn't call it cheating, but there's decals used. There's, paint masks used to achieve, and that's great, but you're not totally airbrushing. Like there's some of these portraits and stuff that are done. There's no way that these things are done that small on the mask. There's no way you can get that detail making it that small. Some are done, but I think there's a lot that are decals, that are water decals that are then airbrushed around and finish the mask that way.
Some incredible work for sure. So I promised you about half an hour, and here we are pushing an hour. Your stories are incredible. I didn't want to miss the fact that you were a practice goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we literally a week ago saw the David Ayers story.
Yeah.
Tell us about being a practice goalie for the Leafs and those times you came very close to being David Ayers.
Basically, we used to play at the Garden Sunday nights. The trainers, the various equipment company reps, and other friends. We used to play on Sunday nights at the Gardens. We had a couple hours. So one time, Bob Stellick was pacing around. Him and his brother Gord played with us too. And he's pacing around like crazy. I said, "What's the matter?" He goes, he says, "I got to find a goalie for practice tomorrow morning. Fear's got to have a root canal." So I jokingly said, "I'll do it." And he laughed and he walked out of the room. And so he come back about 5 minutes later and he goes, "Were you serious about what you were talking about?" what you said? And I said, no, I wasn't, but I said, I wouldn't mind trying it. He goes, okay.
Yeah.
He said, we play it. We're on the ice tomorrow morning at 10 at Varsity Arena. Be there at 9:00. And I said, okay. Now I'm shitting myself because now I got to put my money where my mouth is. And I went and I did okay. And from then on, for the next 13 years, I was their practice goalie. Whenever they had a guy that might have a nagging injury, or they might play that night and he wasn't going to practice, or for whatever reason they needed it, I was their practice goalie. And twice, one time, Damian Rhodes wasn't yet with the Leafs. He was in the minors, I believe, in St. John. And they were trying to get him in because someone had got hurt. And I practiced in the morning. Mike Murphy said to me, he was the assistant coach then. He goes, Harry, says, we might need you tonight. Are you available? I go, yeah. So I got sent this other kid from, I think he was in Brantford, named David Schill. And they sent him to go and replace Rhodes. But as a result of the snowstorm, they couldn't get him in all the way. So they chose at the last minute to bring him back. And he got there just before the game. And he dressed. He dressed instead. They made me a jersey. I still have the jersey. And then the other,
what number?
40. I at that time was 39 years old, and they said, we got to make you a jersey. What number would you like? And I said, well, give me one closest to my age, 40. So I've worn 40 ever since. And then the other time was Felix Potvin was with the Leafs, and his wife was pregnant. And she was in labor the night before the game all day. I practiced in the morning. Murphy was the coach then. And he said, Harry, says, we might need you tonight with Potvin's wife still expecting and in labor. And they said, are you available? I go, yeah, no problem. So again, I think Potvin's wife had the baby around 5:30 finally. And then I was ready to go, and Potvin showed up just before the warm up, and he dressed instead. He didn't play, but he dressed, and I have two jerseys of the almost, and I ended up I did dress 4 games with the Hamilton Canucks in the American hockey.
Okay,
I got a call one Friday. They said, we understand you're the Leafs practice goalie. And I said, yes. They said, well, one of our goalies got hurt. Would you be available to dress tonight? And I said, sure. So I went, signed an American League contract, dressed 4 games with them, and was supposed to go on the road with them I practiced with them for a month. And then was supposed to go on the road with them, and they brought in some Russian kid. And I was in the dressing room the last day, and we're in the shower, and the kid looks at me and he goes, how old are you? And I said, I'm 41. I said, how old are you? 21. I said, I wish I was 21 again.
Well, you might not have had your David Ayers moment, but you've left your mark on the game at every level in a way that not many people have before or since. And it's a real pleasure talking to you. My understanding is you're still in the game building masks a little bit. And if somebody was interested in working with you to build their next mask, how do they get a hold of you?
They can get in touch with me through Instagram at Greg Harrison the Mask, or through Sport Mask directly, or through Goalie Parts.
Perfect. Yeah, well, we'll make sure that all those are linked in the show notes for the podcast, and we'll make sure if anybody wants to have a conversation, they can. And in fact, we actually set this whole thing up through Instagram when I sent a message. Is this the Greg Harrison I'm speaking to?
Yes.
And I'm glad it was.
Well, thank you, David.
So thank you so much for taking the time, far more than promised. But I have a feeling it's just the first of many conversations, because people will be fascinated by your story, by your experiences. And I know we're going to want to revisit them at some point, hopefully in person when I'm in Toronto one day.
Anytime.
Thank you, Greg. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Fascinating. And I don't think you have to be of my generation to really be sucked into that conversation. Well done, Hutch. That was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Do you guys have as we bring in Woody, a favorite Greg Harrison mask over the course of what you've been watching hockey? Let's start with you, Woody.
I was going to say that I'm not of either one of your generations.
No, you're not.
Farts, and I was still drawn into that conversation. I think mine is probably Gary Bromley, the Bones mask. That's just like it's just like, I mean, there's so many iconic masks. Hutch mentioned the Gratton mask. That'd probably be up there, but yeah, just for me, it's Bromley for sure. That thing was so unique, and it captured that sort of edgy, scary element too, beyond that sort of transcended goaltending.
What about you, Hutch?
Yeah, for me, it's Kurt Ridley when he was with the Vancouver Canucks, and you might all assume that's because I'm in British Columbia, but I actually grew up in Toronto, and that's when I grew to love the mask. I wasn't a Canucks fan at the time, but for some reason, just the simplicity, the play off the logo, the boldness to it really stuck with me as a youngster. Found out from Greg, unfortunately, after I think after a trade, it got painted over. So, again,
which happened to a few of those,
a lot of them. Yeah. Because back in the day, the teams weren't going to get you a new mask every how many weeks, for whatever special event comes up.
Well, hey, Corey Schneider, actually, I remember he did a tribute to that Kurt Ridley mask a few years ago here in Vancouver, and that was one of my favorites as well. That is definitely a good lid. Interesting.
Tell everybody about that design who maybe aren't as familiar with.
Well, it really just takes the Canucks logo and then crosses it almost like two crossed swords, and it sort of extends the sticks to both ends. I mean, we can put an image of it up on the up with the show notes here, but yeah, just the simplicity of that Canucks stick in rink logo being crossed like two crossed swords. So.
Well, hey, and to bring this back to the conversation we had at the beginning about gear and Robin Lehner getting his Vegas gear right away, and masks getting painted over, we're actually going to have a segment with Alex Auld who shows us his Harrison mask from early in his career, and he's got a few that got painted over during his NHL career. He bounced around a few teams, and one of his favorite masks all time actually got painted over. So he's showing me the mask, and he's like, "There's actually two here. This one you're just never going to see because it got painted over." This trade deadline, we saw before with Jack Campbell, Mario Designs in Toronto doing a wrap of his Kings mask. And now we've seen it with Louis Domingue here in Vancouver within a day of being traded and facing the nightmare that would have been covering up Devils colors, black and red with the white, blue, and green of Vancouver. They just wrapped the mask. And so not only are you creating a new look and short notice for a new team, but as I understand it, it's easily removable so that artwork underneath is preserved long term. So a guy like Louis Domingue, who told me he had a mask that now going to his full-time artist David Leroux from DL Airbrush for a sort of full-time Canucks mask. In the meantime, he gets to wear Canucks colors without having to sacrifice the artwork that was on that Devil's mask. So old is new and trends are reborn. There's a way to sort of keep guys up to date without having to sacrifice what, in a lot of cases like that lost Ridley mask would have had a lot of meaning to not just the goalie wearing it, but a lot of people around the league.
Yeah, I was kind of proud of Leonard that he didn't wrap his mask, that he went with the Chicago mask for the first couple of games.
It probably would have been a tougher call if he was traded to Vancouver and was trying to match that with. But I think in his case too, it helps that it's dark, like in terms of the color scheme. But obviously so personal with the messages about mental health and the same here logos and stuff like that. I'm with you. This is turning into a Robin Lehner Stan account, the InGoal magazine and our social media channels. But just huge fan of the guy as a goaltender and everything he's been through and the way he's been open about it and the way he's helped other people through other things. And, we'll come back to this one for another day, but, shock still, I think that given what he was willing to stay in Chicago for, they didn't, the Blackhawks, that is, didn't find a way to make that work just as the Islanders did. And, again, a longer topic for another day, but I do wonder how much of this is just teams want their goaltenders to be seen and not heard.
That nickname Panda's a great nickname too.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know the total backstory on it. I don't know that you guys do, but
I don't know it at all. You got to get it for us.
Well, I was just going to say it comes from Chicago, but I don't have the backstory either. And I'm pretty sure there's only one guy in this podcast that can get that kind of information for us.
they're on the road for a couple of games. When they come back, I'm going to sit down with them and try and get that, because it's just a cool. If it's Big Panda or whatever it is, I think Big Panda works. Sort of a playoff Big Poppy and the guy's large human. We showed a shot on our broadcast the other day. At the end of the game, the headbutts and all that, the celebration. Ryan Reeves and Robin Leonard, and Leonard towers over Reeves. It like just makes Reeves look human. I'm like, wow, that says it all. Perspective.
Hey,
go ahead.
Well, we just have to rewind a little bit because we got Woody's favorite mask and my favorite mask. What's your favorite, Harrison?
I would go Belfour.
Yeah,
because it's spectacular detail. Spawned the sort of like Cujo with the nickname. We Eddie the Eagle and Cujo. So there's real historical meaning there and staying power, and you could see it like the conversation where you guys get into detail and too much detail. Mm-hmm. That was an intricate mask, but you could see and tell what it was from virtually anywhere, up close or far away. And I like that part of it too, that it was just it was simple yet magnificent, and it stood out. So that would be mine.
And
Thanks, Manitoba.
Iconic, right? Like we
Iconic,
talked about that before, like outside of Henrik Lundqvist and his pads in New York, and who knows where that goes. But we've sort of lost that iconic one look for a goalie throughout his career type of thing.
I think we're going back to more simplistic designs, though. Yeah, there's a bit of a trend in that recently. I hope it continues.
Me too.
And people can make their stamp on it. March 13th, remember, it's the end of season sale, right, Woody?
Yep, at the Hockey Shop, source for sports in Surrey, and thehockeyshop.com. Make sure you check out all their social media channels. Don't be surprised if they tease a few things in the coming weeks for the sale, but also keep in mind, May 24th, Tendy Fest 5, you'll start to see some details, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Keep your eyes on thehockeyshop.com for all those details, and lots of good things coming up soon.
And Hutch, keep those DMs going to everybody around the hockey world, because you've come up with a couple of beauties recently, and this week's conversation with Greg Harrison was spectacular. That was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Working on somebody who was mentioned in this week's episode on that interview with Harrison. So we'll just hold tight, but working on one for you.
Oh, very good. I like it. Nice. See, there's when Dad stays up late, he gets work done.
Yeah,
unlike the kids.
This is there and he's learning that. That's, I believe in the business they call that a tease.
Yes, you're right about that. We'll see what happens, and we'll make sure that you know about it when it comes to fruition. As Hutch works on his connections and reaches out to those of the goaltending world for the features and the interviews and the stories from the hockey world and inside the crease. For Kevin Woodley, David Hutchison, I'm Darren Millard. Thanks for listening to InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by Source for Sports Surrey, The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com. And make sure you check out The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com for their end of season sale coming up on March 13th. See you next week.